Okay. Selamat sore, good afternoon, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And we are now arrived to
recording in progress.
The third sessions of the webinar series Seeking Martyrdom Overseas, Updates and Assessments on Southeast Asia. And welcome to all distinguished guests and also panelists. Thank you for participating and showing your high interest in the topic. And a little bit of brief recap of what we have done on the first and the second session. First session, we discussed already on the likelihood of having a next generations of Afghan alumni militants from Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. And on the second session, we sought to provide updates on militants in 4 Southeast Asian countries that are currently overseas. A recording of these sessions, for those of you who did not get a chance to attend, are available to be accessed at your convenience on PAKAR's YouTube channel and also on Stratsea. Okay, and today's sessions, we will discuss on 2 important factors that will propel individuals to hijrah or migrate overseas for militant purposes. These factors are namely ideology and money. And for the speaker's profile, allow me to introduce all our distinctive panelists that has arrived here. First up, we have Mr. Adhe Bhakti, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Radicalism and Radicalization Studies, or PAKAR, which is based in Indonesia. His insight on terrorism developments in Indonesia regularly feature in national and international news media. Second, we have Dr. Ahmad El-Muhammady. Good afternoon, Dr. Ahmad. An assistant professor at, an assistant professor at International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, ISTAC-IIUM. And he also holds various external positions such as Associate Fellow at the International Center for Counterterrorism, ICCT, The Hague, Netherlands, International Advisory Committee members at Global Peace Institute, GBI, United Kingdom, Associate Research Fellows, ARI University Technology Mara, UITM, Malaysia, and Deputy Directors of Alumni Relations Divisions, ARD, IIUM. And then third, we have Ms. Drei Toledo, a countering violent extremism specialist. She is also currently a consultant for the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Her expertise includes counterterrorism, terrorism financing, radicalizations, and communist terrorist group in the Philippines. And last but not least, welcome Mr. Kenneth, a research analyst at the International Center for Political Violence and Terrorism Research, ICPVTR, based in the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, RSIS, Singapore. He also leads the Southeast Asia Militant Atlas Initiatives, which is an interactive map that documents all militant activities in Southeast Asia. So welcome to all distinctive panelists for today. If I may have all the panelists to kindly turn on your camera, please. So probably Mr. Adhe and Ms. Drei Toledo can also turn on your camera. Welcome, Pa Adhe and Ms. Toledo, if I can. Okay, right. Okay, so based on the sequence, we'll have Pa Adhe to start with the sessions first, and then we'll be followed by Dr. Ahmad El-Muhammady, and then next we will have Ms. Drei Toledo, and last but not least, we'll have Mr. Kenneth to present for the sessions. Without further ado, would like to welcome Mr. Adhe Bhakti from PAKAR Indonesia. The screen is yours, Pak. Silakan.
Terima kasih, Wulan. Thank you, Wulan, and welcome for the audience to this webinar. And welcome to all the speakers for today. And yes, I think I'm gonna strike to the the presentation that I already preparing for you. Maybe I preparing the share screen first. Okay. Okay. Can Wulan, can you see my presentation here?
Yes, yes, I can.
Yes, yes,
okay.
Bapak, we can see. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm just afraid it's not appear on your screen. Okay. Strike to the topic today and about online ideology, especially and funding on terrorism. Maybe my expertise is only in Indonesian case, so I will presenting the Indonesian what happened in Indonesia case, and I hope this is we are in the region can learn from what happened in Indonesia and become a maybe challenge for us to in the future how to deal with this two topic actually. So spread ideology online is not a new one, I believe, because this especially from past 5 or 10 years, especially used by the ISIS groups that's they're very have used this platform. Maybe we know that social media and internet is not the only scope of radicalization process. We have friendship, maybe we have education institution, family, and workplace. And then yes, last 5 and 10 years, we have social media and internet as a platform to use by the even by the not only us but only the radical group to what are they doing? Online radicalization, I put from Alani, the Open University, is the process by which maybe this is only the term, introduce the ideology, message, and belief system that encourage movement from mainstream belief. And then they use this militant group use online spread online ideology. Because they want to distortion of religious narrative. Then we know about the gonimah in Islamic. We have gonimah is mean like if you lose a war, you can take anything in the field. So the distortion this pure term of gonimah, you can robbery, takfir or unbeliever bank, for example. This is what I call with the distortion of religious narrative, and then. Some of the use kital first or work first as distortion this meaning, the true meaning of the kital verses, and also about takfiri. And this is happened because the member of the group is less of critical thinking. For example, I give they only look at the textual, not the contextual of the verses. That's what happened. That and the distortion of religious narrative is very often used by the ideologue to encourage people to do something. And then playing victim. Yeah, they use spread ideology about how we treated and alienated, and Islam is under attack, something like that. So they always say that. For example, what happened in the social media, through social media, but actually, once again, it's very similar with the distortion narrative. They use what happened. They not actually only say a part of a whole thing. That's maybe, for example. And then a doctrine, yes, we or the ideologues say that I'm the one that right, that are wrong. If someone is not equal with us, that's our enemy, and what we should do with enemy is we embattle them, and then violence is the only way. So this situation doctrine that spread by the militant ideologue in the social media or online platforms, similar like this. And then in the militant perspective, I took this from the Al-Fatihin online magazine from ISIS era in Indonesia in Bahasa. This is realize us. This is show to us that they are very aware about the use of electronic warfare. So this is a challenge for us. And then the on spread ideology through online platform is used for communication, spread of ideology, recruitment, information sharing. For example, is assembling bomb, and sometimes it's used by coordinating action and also fundraising. So this is used for them. And then why they use online platform as spread of ideology? Because it happen anytime. It could use anytime and anywhere. This is an advantage of what happened. This is, for example, in Indonesia, how the news from the news, how the militant group use platform, online platform as a communication. For the left news is sarana communication platform. Terrorists use game online. So we know that Telegram is very safe platform, but sometimes it can take down by the government or by the authorities, and then they use game online, the online game as a communication because it can cover their status. Spread of ideology, just like I say, they use learn the news on the left is about how they use religion from the social media, the girl, and then trapped by ISIS, and then right now Dania, the girl is Dania. Right now is very become what I call with the credible voice, because he already going to Syria but disappointed with the ISIS and back to Indonesia. And then also recruitment. 36 from the CNN, Indonesian CNN from the left, 36 of suspected terrorists arrested, and 90% of them is by or by online. This is a proof how they use online as several function, and also information sharing. From the left is suspect terrorists from East Java learn how to assembling bomb from the online training, something like that. And this is what we screenshot from what we're doing in monitoring during the riot in Makobrimob, special force unit police. There are the riot there, and then some of people encourage or call people, other people to do something outside the headquarters of the special police station. So this is, for example, how they use the platform. This is Telegram to coordinating the action. And then fundraising. Also, I will explain in the next part of my presentation, and especially this funding on terrorism. Okay, funding on terrorism focus on source of fund and how they transfer, and also what they use with this funding. Source of fund. So funding
Hello.
Disconnected.
Pak Adhe is disconnected, and perhaps let's wait for a minute or two to see if Pak Adhe can immediately get back online. But if it takes longer than that, if I may ask Dr. Ahmad El-Muhammady to probably jump in first, and we can circle back to Pak Adhe once he returned. The era of online seminar is always very challenging. We are highly dependent on internet connections. Okay. All right. Pak Adhe is back.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. Pak Adhe?
Yeah, mute. Pak Adhe, you are mute.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. I have a problem with the connection.
It's okay. For a minute there, I thought I was the one who got kicked out. It's okay, Pak Adhe. Please return to your slides.
Okay, I return to my slide. Okay. Okay. And then this is and continue. This I can skip this one. Because this is a methodology of transfer, right? What they're doing, just like they use courier, informal transfer like hawala, money service business, formal banking, false trade invoicing, and the high value commodities like trading, and also a lot of thing to do. Use of fund is first of all is they use for expand influence. I mean this they still need to do worship activities. So they need money to going here, going there, and then they used to preparation. The terminology in the militant group is IDAT, IDAT and Tadrib. Tadrib with mean training, preparation and training. So they use money for preparation, and then they use money for action, of course, and the support network supporting. In Indonesian case, I want to explain to you about how some groups still use logistic to supporting the group is personnel and weapon, and then also they use for example, for very close example is when we're talking about the Bali bombing case, the trio bomber, what we call for the Muklas, and Imam Samudra and Amrozi, use about $50,000 US to this operation. $30,000 is coming from Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda Osama bin Laden through Hambali and through the courier, yes. Not only from the Osama bin Laden, also Imam Samudra has a gold shop robbery in Banten area, where the place of the origin place of him. So this is, for example, how the combination of the transfer money through courier and then use illegal activities to funding an action of terrorism. And then we have hacker from terror group. I want to we in Medan, not Sumatra, Rizky Gunawan arrested by police because he successfully to hacking the maybe a transactional website, and then he can get about in Indonesia maybe about some people say about 5 billion rupiah, but other source say about 8 billion rupiah. And this is Rizky Gunawan, and he sent about 500 million to Santoso in Poso for operation of Santoso. This is hacker from terror group. So this is Katibah Gonggong Rebus, the group that planned to attack Marina Bay in Singapore. Maybe people remember this. So when you're looking at the Bahru Naim, use some use Western Union as to transfer to Gigi Rahmat Dewa, one of the perpetrator of the Katibah Gonggong Rebus group. And then we have some example from accident in suicide bombing at Solo police station. Once again, Bahru Naim use PayPal account also and banking transactional to send some money to the perpetrator. This is a social network analysis of Tamarind attack perpetrator. Just like you say, we talking about the how Malaysia militant Dr. Mahmud, I believe, is sent some money to the and then used by the Jamaah Ansaruddaullah Indonesia to attack some place in Tamarind, di Jalan Tamarind, that we know about the Tamarind attack event. And sometimes they use general criminal crimes, general crime as like, for example, Santoso is always coming to the group. The member of Santoso group is always coming to the mosque and steal the charity box, charity box in the mosque. And then Abu Roban, based in Lampung and Java, have a robbery BRI bank. It's like almost the bank, the small bank, but almost everywhere in Indonesia, and also the post office. This is the terrorist Abu Roban terrorist group that have specific to attack. Also, we know about CIMB Niaga in Medan, robbery by the group of terrorists. They use money. Other is sport network. This is several charity organization in Indonesia, and then yes, not all of them have related to the militant group. This four is yes. Infak Dakwah Center, IDC, we have Hilal Amar Society Indonesia, we have Azam Dakwah Center, and Mercy. Hilal Amar and Mercy, I'm sorry, Hilal Amar and some organizer, Hilal Amar and some organizer, right now he's have related to Jamaah Islamiyah recently. Jamaah Islamiyah have like underbow organization, Hilal Amar and some organizer as their charity organization, and IDC and ADC is pro-ISIS group, charity organization in Indonesia. We focus on IDC and ADC, for example, how IDC supporting by Abu Bakar Ba'asir on his statement in the social media to funding on IDC. And then this is what IDC doing with the money is to establish or build some like houses, small houses for wife and family perpetrator of terrorism that arrest or killed by police. So this is for 2004 picture they already established. So if sometimes there are stigma in Indonesia community, if your husband is arrested by police because of terrorism, so the wife or family is diusir ya for dari kampung itu, for the village, and then they don't have the place to stay, and then the IDC provide a place to live for the wife. And also Azam Dakwah Center, this is for ISIS group, how they support the operation, health operation of one of the what they call mujahid, perpetrator of terrorism. So the son of the perpetrator, and then also the son of they always help them. And this is, for example, another group, what we call it, Gerakan Sehari Seribu, 1,000 rupiah a day. So this is group establish not safe house, but maybe stay house in the maybe the audience familiar with Nusa Kambangan, the prison island in Indonesia. So in opposite the Cilacap, in Cilacap they established the house for if you want to visit your husband, your relative in prison island, you can stay here for a while, for a night, and then you give you like a breakfast, even a transportation to the next transportation that you used to back to the origin. And then this is what happened in Palu, earthquake in Palu. If you're looking, this is like charity for the victim of Palu earthquake. But if you're looking close to the background, you can find the Mujahidin Indonesia Timur flag. Very interesting. They also help people that have suffering from because of the earthquake. Okay, this is my last, maybe last part of is only conclusion and suggestion. Maybe we can talk it also as a question because and then that's for a while, Wulan, and then maybe we can continue with the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Adhe, for your opening presentations. And for ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to drop them first in the chat box. And after all the respective panelists finish with their presentations, we can directly move ahead to question and answer sessions. Okay, moving on to the second distinguished panelist, we have Dr. Ahmad El-Muhammady from ISTAC-IIUM Malaysia. Dr. Ahmad, the screen is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Chairperson, Wulan, my colleagues, Pak Adhe, Ken, and Toledo, and distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. And first and foremost, I would like to congratulate and thanks the organizer, SERV Indonesia, and PAKAR, Pak Adhe, and also Stratsea for organizing this discussion. I think this is very important given the current situation that we have today in Europe and also in Middle East. In this discussion this afternoon, I would like to mention maybe three important things. Firstly, I want to discuss with you about the term foreign fighters and mujahideen, because I think these are the thing that we are observing in our region. If we look at the title of our discussion this afternoon, or I would say the series of our discussion, it is quite interesting actually when I look at it. The Seeking Martyrdom Overseas, update and assessment on Southeast Asia. And the specific topic we're going to talk about is the keys to Hijrah, cash or ideology. So in this discussion, as I said, there are three things that I would like to mention. I would like to begin by talking to you about the terms foreign fighters and mujahideen. Let me begin by sharing with you a brief background about the phenomena of foreign fighters, or some people call it foreign terrorist fighters, even though they don't like it. They say that we are not terrorists, we are mujahideen. We are going there to fight for the sake of people, for the sake of Allah. We are not terrorists at all. Yeah, this is what they said if you talk to them. So the phenomenon of foreign fighters, I think, start in 1990s during Afghanistan wars. So I think that is one of the best example that we can cite about people who are coming from certain region, travel to another country to fight, and they return back. So that's why they call it returnees or foreign fighters, because they are foreigners who went there to fight on behalf of the people who are fighting the powers, the forces in there. So in 1990s is one of the examples that we can see, and because after the Afghanistan war, we can see that the Afghan veteran, they came back here. They call it Afghan veteran. So in Malaysia, there are some people who used to fight in Afghan. I met many of them, and they say that we are the Afghan veteran. And they come back here with, of course, with certain skills, right? With a certain skill set in the paramilitary trainings, they have that. And they have experience, actual experience in battlefield. And later on, they came back here and they created groups such as Kumpulan Mujahidin Malaysia. It's one of the earliest groups. And also later, Jamaah Islamiyah. These people were the veteran, Afghan veteran. All right, so that's number one. That's very interesting. The second example that I can give is Bosnian conflict in 1992 until 1995. We also have some people who are traveling to Bosnia to fight Serbian army. And some of them were students who are studying in Saudi Arabia, for example, study in Pakistan, in India. They went there to fight. I met with one of them here in Malaysia. He said to me, when I was a student in University of Medina, the lecturers encouraged me to go and fight in Bosnia. So they gave free tickets to go there. So during summer time, people go for vacation. They go to fight in Bosnia. He survived. He came back to study at the university, and later on, after finish university, they come back to Malaysia. So I always go and talk to him and asking about his experience fighting in Bosnia. But he did not join any group anyway. I think we don't have, even though we have Bosnian veterans, but they do not come back here and create a terrorist group or terrorist cell in Southeast Asia or elsewhere. And I think this is one of the quite interesting thing that we compare with Afghan situation, because there is one Malaysian veteran, Bosnian veteran that I interviewed. I asked him, because he's a military man. He's actually military colonel in Malaysian army. So he went there to fight he went there under United Nations banner as a peacekeeper. After he completed his United Nations mission, he asked Malaysian government to allow him to stay to help the Bosnia. And of course, Malaysian government do not allow that. Malaysian government say, you have to come back. So he came back. He came back to Malaysia and resigned from military and went back to Bosnia to train some Bosnian in the art of war or insurgency. But he said to me, I make sure all my students promise me one thing: you do not kill civilian. You do not target any non-military establishment or infrastructure. So that was the promise. So his friend pledged the allegiance, promised that, okay, Sheikh, I will not fight, I will not kill any civilian. However, some of his students later on been captured around the world, and many of them mentioned his name to the interrogators. Okay, I was trained by this particular man. His name is Abu Muhammad from Malaysia, he said. So the interrogators, the CIA, MI6, was wondering, like, who is this Abu Muhammad in the first place? So he tried to ask around Malaysian authorities, Malaysian managed to identify him. Okay, man. So the authorities arrested him and put him under Internal Security Act for 5 years. And he did not satisfy. We did not satisfied. He was very disappointed. He complained to Malaysian government. He said that why do you arrest me? I do not cause, I do not incite, instigate any terrorist activity, but why do you put me under Internal Security Act? He wrote a book about his experience, Commando Jihad. You can find this book. I think I can share with you the book. So this is the book. I think you cannot see. Commando Jihad. Colonel Jihad. So Colonel Jihad is the book that he wrote. So in this book, he explained his experience. He recounted his experience fighting in Bosnia. Okay, so in this case, however, it is different from Afghanistan because, as I said, that he did not commit to violence. He just attacked because he said, I understand the law, military law. He's a well-trained, he's a colonel in the military Malaysian army. So he said that never use violence against civilians. However, because his name was cited by many people, then he got arrested and charged under terrorism law, Internal Security Act. But he was released and he wrote the book. But until today, he still have a grudges towards the authorities for detaining him for 5 years, because I did not commit any terrorist act. Why would I have to be detained? He said. He said to me until now, every time I met, that he complained to me about this. So that is the second. Another phenomenon involved foreign fighters was in Maluku sectarian conflict in 1999-2002. We have people here actually from Malaysia traveling to Maluku to join the conflict in there. And of course, I've met some of them here in Malaysia, and I interviewed him for my research. He tells the story how he did conduct the operation in there, involving the targeting church and the pastor and so on. And of course, the last one is not the last one, the second last is the Mindanao conflict in Mindanao. We have people also went there from Indonesia, from Malaysia. I'm not sure from Singapore, maybe Ken can talk about this, whether or not they have people from Singapore. But of course, the top one would be joining ISIS, right? So joining ISIS is, of course, we have a lot of people going there, but we talk more about this. So, but let me tell you this, based on my analysis on these foreign fighters, I wrote a paper on this, would be published very soon, I think. So if you look at all these foreign fighters phenomena that I mentioned earlier, Afghanistan, Bosnia, Mindanao, and Maluku, there are several common denominators that we can see. Number one, those who traveled to join the war and became fighters were predominantly male, no participation of women or families in the migration. So mostly male and no women involved. That is number one. Number two, the returning fighters has history of bringing back their expertise. So in all this conflict, they bring back their expertise, ideology, and networking to create a local group to start off the recruitment drive or fundraising and planning of attacks. So we can see this thing in the case of JI in 1986. And yeah, so that was the situation that we have seen, common denominators that we have seen. So the experience that we have, at least I'm speaking in the context of Malaysia. So when I mean, speaking from the security agency's point of view, whenever they have this experience, they would think that, okay, so there would be 4 stages of participation. One is the departure to the war, in a country, back to their home country after the war, and is the creation of the local cell, and finally plan of attack. So these are the patterns that we have seen based on this experience. All right. However, because I just want to tell you, there was a paradigm shift. There was a paradigm shift in the Malaysian security services in understanding the foreign fighters phenomenon. However, as you know, the ISIS forces consolidated its control. No, this is what happened later, and some Malaysians are found to make their way to Raqqa and other ISIS cities. Malaysian police thought that they are going to see similar pattern of event. That is the departure, the return, the creation of cell, and the attack. However, as the event unfolds, it is proven that this hypothesis is wrong. This hypothesis is wrong because they observe more people gradually leaving ISIS-controlled territories and to return home, especially towards the end of ISIS downfall in 2019. So there was a paradigm shift in the thinking of the intelligence community about the nature of threat, both of threat posed by the returnees, I mean the foreign fighters. So there are several key factors that contribute to the change of thinking about this episode. And there are 4 points here. Number one, those fighters did not travel alone. So they brought families, wife and children as a part of migration to settle under the newly established caliphate, as they said. So this practice did not happen in the case of war in Afghanistan and Bosnia in the 90s. We don't see this thing at all. Second, these families are seeking, the current situation now, these families are seeking for help from Malaysian government to bring them home, especially after their husband, the fighters, died in the battle. This also did not happen in the past, during Afghans and during the Bosnian War. The third, the creation of a local militant group, as forecast, occurred in the post-return, did not happen because all returnees or the returning fighters are quickly detained and charged under stringent terrorism law regime. So there is no chance for them to come back and create the cell. And then number four, the actual attack was not conducted by the returning terrorist fighters, at least in the Malaysian context. I think in Indonesia, the case is different, yeah, because they involve women too. So the actual attack was not conducted by the returning fighters, but by the locals set their foot in Syria. So it is quite unique in Malaysian case. I think if we put this, the experience together, Indonesia and Malaysia and the Philippines, I think we can see that they have a different experience. So that is number one. So when we look at this phenomenon finally, and of course I managed to talk to them, I asked them, how do you identify yourself as? Going there to join, number one is, how do you identify yourself and what is the purpose? What is the motivation? He said that for me, for male especially, they would say that I went there to be the Mujahideen. And I believe that my motivation is not for the material gains. My motivation is, I believe in what I do. I believe in the Islamic State. I believe in jihad. I believe in defending the weak against the oppression. And then he said to me, you see, I left everything behind. I actually sold everything that I have in order to come to this. He said that, of course, for us, it's very unlucky, but for them, if I'm lucky, I will die there. So to me, I do not think that the motivation is for cash. The motivation is for ideology. I am thinking in this way because based on the numerous conversations that I had, I did not come across the people who went there to gain some material gains. Of course, there are material gains. They were provided by, their family were provided by ISIS, like homes, like salary, and they were paid actually. They were paid by ISIS. I think about 500 USD per family. They have food. They have a house. And if the woman is single, they say that if you want to move around, you have to get married. And we talk about women maybe in future, but it is another interesting story. So single women, you want to move around, you have to get married. If you don't get married, then you have to stay in the house. You cannot go out. And if they got married, the guy died in the battle, he will entrust his friend, say that you take care. His friend will get, and that will continue. 1 or 2, 3 people, because they keep dying, and so they keep marrying in that way. Some of them that got children at the same time, yeah. So we have also cases like that. So I think that's I have touched already. Number one is about the term itself, the foreign fighters and the phenomenon of foreign fighters. And they identify themselves as Mujahideen because of they are fighting in the names of religion, defending the weak, and they want to establish the Islamic State. At least that is what they think. And the motivation is, as I said, is ideology. I can see the presence of more on ideology rather than material gains. I interviewed one of the person who sold everything, sold the cars, the property that he has, is sold it, and he managed to raise about 25,000, and he used those money. And one of them, they have a shop. They have a small shop in the northern part of Malaysia. She and his family sold the shop and raised 100,000, and they brought the money to go there. And they said they're thinking like they want to rebuild a new life in the caliphate. All right. So final point, point number 3 that I would like to mention is people think that they went there for Hijrah, and some of them involved in jihad. I agree with Adhe, who mentioned that this term has been misunderstood, misinterpreted. The agenda of ISIS. They like to twist. Jihad. I mean, some hurt associated with terrorism. We as Muslims have to be clear about this. Jihad is Muslim tradition, Islamic teaching. Same goes to Hijrah. Those people who have certain agenda, political, they interpreted for, they captured a lot of people's interest. That's why people are joining them. So I think these are I think there's some point that I would like to share, and I hope that it may help us to understand the subject. Thank you very much. I hand over back to Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. El-Muhammady. Really giving us some points to think about when we're talking about the definitions of Hijrah and those who did the migrations. Ladies and gentlemen, I see that some of you has begun to address your questions. I would like to invite more of you if you have any thoughts and comments about the explanations from the distinctive panelists for today. And while we're moving on to the next speakers, I'd like to invite Ms. Drei Toledo for our third speaker. Ms. Drei Toledo, are you here? Can you hear me?
I'm here. Hello. Good afternoon.
Hello. Yes, I can hear you. Okay. If you have presentations or slides, the screen is yours. Go ahead, Ms. Toledo.
Okay. So, good afternoon to everyone who is here today. And for the keys to Hijrah, cash and ideology, I would like to share about the Philippine situation. And as a preview, I would like to share about the common history that gets shared over and over again for the past 2 and almost 3 generations in the Philippines. So it's always highlighted, whether in the form of music videos that can be found on YouTube. It can also be highlighted within madrasas, that the history of the Filipino foreign fighters, which are also referred to locally as Afghan Veterans, goes all the way back to 1979, when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan following the overthrow and assassination of Nur Muhammad Taraki, the man installed by Moscow the year before as leader of its puppet regime in Kabul. It was the beginning of an ultimately pointless, bloody conflict with the guerrilla forces of the Mujahideen that would rage for 9 years, claiming the lives of 15,000 Soviet troops and more than 1 million Afghans, and ending in Moscow's humiliating withdrawal from the country. An estimated 300 Filipino Muslims from different tribes and indigenous groups in the Philippines joined the Afghan Mujahideen fighters during this period to topple down the Afghan communist government. However, the Mujahideen's failure to restore peace and stability due to their infighting offered the Taliban a chance to seize power. Though foreign fighters, including Arabs such as Al-Qaeda founder Osama bin Laden, had come to Afghanistan to take part in the earlier Afghan jihad against the Soviet forces, the Taliban regime allowed them to stay for ideological reasons. The conflict, which became a proxy war between the Soviets and US, had dramatic geopolitical consequences, and arguably it hastened the breakup of the Soviet Union, which collapsed in 1991. Now, this created a breeding ground for terrorism, leading to the rise of Osama bin Laden, who fought alongside the Mujahideen. As an active faction of foreign fighters that had come to take part in the Afghan jihad in the 1980s, the estimated 300 Filipino Muslims that joined the Mujahideen eventually came back to the Philippines. When the Taliban seized power in Afghanistan, the sons of the Filipino-Afghan war veterans, who were eventually sent by their own fathers to Afghanistan for war training, realigned themselves with the Taliban regime. This is the deeply embedded root of the Taliban connection to the Philippines and the Islamic State Southeast Asia, or Daesh Southeast Asia. So first, I would like to ask this question: will the new Taliban government fight their own brothers? This is a question that is repeatedly asked within the Philippine context, and the situation wherein the Daesh terrorists from Philippines are not necessarily hostile against the Taliban, as opposed to the situation in other countries. So for today's discussion, our updates on extremist propaganda will be focused on the Taliban and the Islamic State Khorasan's propaganda in Southeast Asia and in the increasing tensions between these two entities. We will also talk about whether there has been an increase in online radicalization and efforts to make use of current platforms online, and our assessment of online platforms that could potentially be used to disseminate such ideologies, such as YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. So we will also discuss the current modus operandi to raise funds by Southeast Asian extremist groups, and how have governments and CSOs responded to the fundraising and dissemination of ideologies. And last but not the least, for this discussion, we will talk about our assessments of the current mitigative measures and the way forward. So here I would like to highlight the power of subtlety for radicalization. And I would like to, share a story about the frog in the boiling pond, right? The frog that gets boiled alive it doesn't go into the water knowing that the water is actually hot. It goes into the water when the water is still cool. And if there are any changes in the temperature, if it is gradual, the frog will not actually leave the pond. And towards the end, the frog could actually die because it cannot tell the difference between, the shift from the subtle, the calm, and the cool waters, and to the point that the water is boiling. So when you look at that particular metaphor, we understand that the more effective form of radicalization, especially online, for promoting Taliban in the Philippines is actually subtle. So here you can see that the video on YouTube on the right, it's a reaction video regarding Taliban, and it's a very calmly delivered talk, and it is very persuasive, and there are over 45,000 views for this, whereas The other Tausug song that celebrates the Taliban and the Mujahideens and ISIS and actually extols the terrorist Osama bin Laden as a hero has only 103 views. And another form of strategic radicalization, especially for the Filipino people, because Filipinos have one thing in common. Although we have 7,107 islands, and there are a lot of reasons for conflict and clashes, the thing that unites Filipinos is music, the love for music. So even for terrorist organizations, making use of artists, musicians, and the creation of music videos is integral into recruiting a lot of young audiences, young minds into the terrorist organization. So, for example, in this particular music video, it's also on YouTube. It's very melodic from the Tausug and the Yakans. They will watch this, and it's a videoke. You know, the videoke, like a sing-along type, and you can follow the lyrics. And so it's a very subtle form of radicalization that even children and teenagers can follow and sing along to. And in the same series of music videos, you can see that this Yakan Taliban music video is also promoting narco-terrorism. And this is not at all subtle. You know, this is a form of justification, a way for them to rationalize that it's okay to partake in narco-terrorism for the so-called greater good, or their perception, their twisted agenda of how they present their twisted meaning of jihad, which is supposed to be a beautiful thing. And here, these kinds of videos justify the active participation of the religious extremists in the Philippines in narco-terrorism, especially as a distribution network for crystal meth, for cocaine, and for opium in the Southeast Asian region. And as a journalist, I covered the entire Marawi siege, you know, from the 5-month war, and I stayed on for another year in 2017. And one of the not so highlighted parts of the war was that one of the biggest shabu or crystal meth laboratories was also found in Marawi, and it was also blown up during the war. And this was actually what funded this prolonged war, which not many Filipinos predicted would have lasted almost 6 months. And it's still taking us time to rebuild Marawi City. And unfortunately, now when the ISIS was defeated, the infrastructure for distribution of drugs was still there. A lot of the ISIS foreign fighters, as well as the child soldiers who are now young adults, who were part of the narco-terrorism trade on behalf of Daesh Southeast Asia, they are still there. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of them, though they have surrendered and they have signed papers that they are certifying that they are surrenderers, they have returned into the narco-terrorism business. And the funding is now coming from the Taliban. So here you also see that the use of karaoke sing-along videos and the chat room features of online video games is used to promote Taliban in the Philippines. The same thing happened with Daesh. When I was interviewing child soldiers that I tracked down in 2017 until 2018, the common chat room, like for adults, they make use of Telegram, but for the child soldiers and the teenagers who are addicted to computer games, they make use of games like Clash of Clans, Call of Duty, and they utilize the chat features of such games to exchange updates and messages about the meetups and distribution, either for narco-terrorism or for the information that they pass on regarding being spotters for the terrorist organization. Another thing is now you have very viral and influential rap songs promoting Taliban and the role-playing of violence within the music videos aimed at the radicalization of young audiences. So in this particular Taliban music, it's very, for young people with impressionable minds, they think that this is something cool, especially because it's a rap song, you know, and it's very catchy. And so you can see the cultural difference, like from this perspective, it's rap, but in the Philippine setting, it's more melodic. It's infusing the tribal music that we also have. But all the same, because Filipinos like rap, this kind of, you know, rap and hip hop, this kind of music also gets circulated a lot within the circle of Daesh and Taliban supporters. So here we can see that the calmly delivered and more subtle forms of extremist propaganda online reaches a much wider audience and can therefore lead to the radicalization of more individuals. So that's why we needed to highlight the fact that they actually make use of YouTube. They make use of Facebook. They make use of TikTok. They make use of different supposedly harmless social media platforms and games to radicalize young people who like the frog in the pond story. They don't realize that they're already in hot water or in a boiling pond, because it starts out cool and calm. And next, I would like to share about the women's role in propaganda and terror activities, which is also related to the online platforms utilized by Daesh and Taliban in the Philippines. Women have played a vital role in the success of the programs and operations of terrorist groups. So various activities have largely depended on the involvement of the relatives who are women, and some are actually girls, very, very young children. Some I have interviewed are 7, 10, 14 years old, and they act as couriers for letters. Some of them act as couriers for money. And so this is especially useful in the role of women and girls is especially useful in the propaganda arena. And women relatives were highly active in social media sites such as Facebook and Telegram, where they post videos, images, and other propaganda materials to boost the morale of the group and win the support of the people in their communities. So here you can see a screenshot of a Facebook post. This female Filipino Daesh supporter based in the United States posted in Tagalog. And in her Facebook messages, she addressed this to fighters and supporters of Daesh in the Philippines, offering support by sending mobile phone credits. On September 2020, this account posted, "Whoever needs load, just message me. Inshallah, at least I can help this way." 3 months later, on February 11, 2021, she also posted another message saying, "I am sending cell phone loads to my brothers in the Philippines. Alhamdulillah, whoever needs load amongst my Mujahideen brothers, just send me a private message." And to which another jihadist account replied, "May Allah reward you with goodness, sister." On November 29, 2021, a woman who is a relative of Daesh Sulu militant with the Facebook account Mujahidat Patikul posted on her Facebook account urging members of the ASG and Daesh Sulu to shoot policemen who are implementing city ordinances in the province. So in these particular messages, you can see that because they always post in their local dialect or their local languages, it becomes harder for Facebook or for the Facebook algorithm to actually take it down or to flag it as malicious. And even if you try to report such accounts, it will not be taken off by Facebook because Facebook does not understand the language. So the Here also, the Abu Sayyaf group in Sulu and Basilan have utilized their women relatives in the procurement of supplies like food, ammunition, uniforms, combat boots, electronic and electrical equipment that are needed by the group. And even inside the detention facilities, women relatives of the ASG, Maute and the BIFF, they have shown their importance and contribution in the terror activities of these groups. Even in jailbreaks, women have partaken in it by smuggling in guns in the prison, although thank God it hasn't been successful, but there had been injuries and some individuals had been shot, and none thus far have been reported dead, but this has happened several times, and each time it has been a female relative that would smuggle in the weapon inside prisons. So the different roles of women here, we have seen this time and again in the Philippines, whether it's Taliban, whether it's Daesh, Abu Sayyaf group, the Maute leading it, or the communist terrorist group. All these terrorist organizations make use of women. And one of the things, especially in the Philippines, is that we have very pronounced role for women. So the equality of men and women is something that is very important in the Filipino culture. And even in the terrorist organizations, these particular supposedly good virtue or value in society gets exploited. And women take on roles the same as men would do. And even in the Sulu bombing, there have been female suicide bombers already in the Philippines. Here, briefly, I would like to share about this particular controversial news wherein a police superintendent, Maria Cristina Nobleza, who's equivalent to a one-star general in the Philippine National Police, became romantically involved with an Abu Sayyaf group and Daesh supporter named Dongon, and it was very disturbing because, of course, Nobleza was an intelligence operation division chief herself, and she was the one who interrogated Nobleza when he was 15 years old and charged with double murder, double homicide, and arson. He's a bomb expert for the group, and he started very young. He was also a child soldier when he began, and this police officer had a husband who was also another police officer, but she began having relations with this terrorist, and they were caught in 2017 when she tried to save him and another Abu Sayyaf group during an operation. So she was caught by the government security forces and has been dismissed from the police force and is also in jail. So when we look at what happened, people often say that, oh, it's she was radicalized by love. She wasn't incentivized by cash or ideology, that she was basically radicalized by love. But I think there are deeper aspects of it that have not been explored, though I do not want to speculate here about it. But here we need capacity building for the uniformed personnel to help them deal with radicalization efforts by terrorist groups which target to turn government security forces. So in the Philippines, this is very common that terrorist organizations make use of girls and women to target especially the predominantly male government security forces. And that's why the deadliest terrorist operatives in the country are women, at least in the Philippines, because they are the ones who can get close to police and military high-ranking officers and get information through seducing them and turning them and causing them to betray the country. So an update on the security situation in Mindanao for us to understand the ruptures that are happening in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao in BAR. So ruptures between kinship networks and former comrade in arms are often propelled by enduring land conflicts between the Moro Islamic Liberation Front commanders, between the MILF and the Moro National Liberation Front commanders, the MNLF, and between the MILF and the armed groups of the indigenous peoples, settlers. This has been happening even now, especially during the pandemic. There's a lot of clan feuds. We call it locally as rido. So they would kill each other over the land, the farming land that is being distributed by the government. The violence involving armed groups in the province was aggravated by political feuds involving politicians in Maguindanao, notably in Gindulungan, Datu Piang, Sharif Aguak, Datu Paglas, and Cotabato City. In Maguindanao, we have ambush killing of the MILF Bangsamoro Inner Guard Commander Peges Lentagi, Mama Sainged, and 8 of his men in Gindulungan, Maguindanao, just this February 2020. Mama Sainged's cousin, Jordan Mama Lintang, alias Commander Jordan of the MNLF, led the suspects. And another battle that we would like to highlight was in Talitay, Maguindanao, which concerned control over the political office in the town and the province of Maguindanao, as well as control over the illicit trade and distribution of illicit drugs. So this is something that, you know, is really important to highlight, because the problem of illegal drugs, especially in relation to narco-terrorism, is a very big problem in the Philippines because of our geographical location. It makes it strategic for the drug cartels to partner, the international drug cartels to partner with the terrorist organizations in the Philippines. And even the local government units, some with very corrupt mayors, governors, they fight over the illicit trade and distribution of drugs. And they make use of the terrorist organization, whether it's Daesh or Abu Sayyaf group or other factions, so that they can serve as the private militia for the illicit trade, and also to serve as the armed goons of the local government unit officials who are very corrupt. So a violent clan feud was reignited in March of this 2021 between the late former mayor Montasir Sabal and a rival clan associated with the MILF. And this alone displaced about 700 families or 3,500 individuals in this area. In Maguindanao, Governor by Mariam Mangandadatu appointed Talitay Municipal Councilor Fahad Midtimbang to act as mayor. And this political replacement ordered actually heightened the tensions between the provincial governor and the MILF leadership in the BARM, and the BARM Minister Naguib Sinarimbo opposed the governor's decision, and a stalemate remains until today. So the conflict include non-Moro indigenous communities who were allegedly bullied by the MILF, MNLF, and the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters. The alleged recruitment by MILF in Datu Bla Sinsuat, terrorizing the Teduray and non-Islamized indigenous groups, is also a phenomenon that we are still observing. In Lanao del Sur, these militants and their families are given rice rations by terrorist recruiters. They are even given land to do farming, and they are able to sell their produce to the local markets with a ready buyer. So this is an incentive that even former terrorists, those who have already surrendered to the Philippine government, during the pandemic, they returned to the old way of life of being active commanders because of the offer that they will be given land to till and everything is provided for. They just have to farm it. And even the market that will purchase all their farm produce is already secured by the terrorist organization. And training camps like Camp Darul Arham, managed by former Kauswagan Mayor Yasser Hassan Samporna, and Maging Lanao del Sur, we have Abu Dimam and Abu Jihad, members of Dawla Islamiyah, and 6 leaders who were killed during the March 2022 military encounter. The DIMG is headed by Faharuddin Haji Sattar alias Abu Zakaria, ISIS Emir. And for the Philippines, the greatest challenge to making BARM successful is the mushrooming extremist training camps that are funded by foreign entities benefiting from the divided loyalties of the residents in different tribes of Mindanao. And you know, this is very frustrating for us as well, because with the challenges of the pandemic, and we have high hopes for BARM to succeed. Our government has downloaded more than 76 billion, but you know, this has not, for whatever reason, this has not prevented the mushrooming of the extremist training camps, which means that the terrorism financing coming from Taliban supporters, from Daesh supporters are still pouring in, especially amidst the pandemic. So we want to now discuss the reasons why they joined, at least within the Philippine context. So using the network theory, we argue that individuals become radicalized through their social networks, and violent radicalization is more likely to take place in small groups with high amounts of peer pressure and bonding. So this is the reason why in the Philippines, we always have small cells, usually groups of 10, and they will not know anyone outside of that small group. And the personal bonds that they have and the very tight ties that is actually what leads to violently radicalizing them. So one of the things that earlier, the observation of Dr. Ahmad is that for Malaysian foreign fighters, they are motivated by ideology more than cash. Like that was what he highlighted. But in the case of the Philippines, for all the interviews, I've interviewed hundreds of supposed surrenderers that even returned as foreign fighters. I've gone to the camps where child soldiers are kept, and it's actually motivated by cash. And so this is the situation of the Philippines, that the perceived religious extremists are their clear motivation is cash. And why do we say this? Because even in an island in Visayas that has been recruiting children as child soldiers, they were recruiting Christian children. So Christian children were recruited to join Daesh. And the families also agreed because of cash. And so in the Philippines, the sons of the Filipino foreign fighters, who are locally referred to as the Afghan war veterans, they bond easily with each other. And they have gone to Egypt or Pakistan or Turkey for their education. And many of them served together after their fathers and grandfathers. They also served and trained in Afghanistan. So when they came back to the Philippines in Mindanao, it's a very tight group. And that's why we can see that they even have localized songs that celebrate the Taliban, the Mujahideen, and even Daesh. So they produce music videos in the local language. So before I end my discussion, what I would like to highlight the most is for the Philippine situation, we are hoping that a regional research collaboration on the impact of the Taliban in Southeast Asia is what we really need at this point in time. And this 3-part webinar is an interesting takeoff point for a more elaborate discourse on this security threat to our region. And for your questions, I would gladly take them during the forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Toledo. Some very interesting insights from your presentations, and I'm sure it will raise lots of questions and comments later. But before we enter the Q&A sections, of course, we still have our fourth speaker, the distinctive Mr. Kenneth Yo. Without further ado, Mr. Kenneth Yo, the screen is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Let me just share my screen and make sure that everyone can see my slides. Can I check if the slides are clear?
Slides are clear.
All right,
clear.
thank you. Right, thank you so much. So firstly, I'd like to thank the organizers for organizing this fantastic dialogue. And I'm very honored to be amongst very distinguished, a very distinguished panel. But the problem with speaking last is that, most of the panelists has covered most of the points, and I probably need to skip some of the slides because these points are repeated. But nonetheless, I thought maybe just to share a couple of my thoughts before we start the presentation proper. The question is really what happened. In 2017, we have the Marawi siege. In 2018, we see a rise in all forms of terrorism in Southeast Asia. And in 2019, there's a surge in the number of suicide bombings, particularly in Philippines, Indonesia. And then in 2020, everything stopped. We don't see much activities online. We don't see much activities in the news. And this is one of the data I've collected over the years, as in over just 2019, right, where Ashraf News Agency, it's an ISIS news channel on Telegram. They immediately, almost immediately after they started, they shared 2,500 messages daily, and then it stopped. So what happened? I also like to share some data from the Southeast Asia Militant Atlas, where in 2019 we see a peak in terrorist activities, violent terrorist activities in Southeast Asia, and then there's a gradual decline. So really, what happened from 2020 onwards? And the most obvious conclusion that anyone could have identified it's COVID-19. After COVID-19 occurred, terrorism is relatively muted throughout the region. And there are good reasons why, but I also like to say that the authorities have done a very good job in curtailing terrorism amidst COVID-19. However, just because there's a lull in terrorism, it does not mean that violent extremists are not reorganizing, rebooting, and trying to revitalize their operations. As you can see on this slide, it's basically pictures of terrorists in Southeast Asia trying to organize and reboot their operations. So the online narratives in general, despite COVID, stays the same. There are updates of the spoils of war, there are Islamic State videos, and the general absence of ideological debates in the online atmosphere. This is a video, let me just fast forward it, showing the Pledge of Allegiance of Southeast Asians to Abu Quraishi. As you can see, it is not one or two militants, it is a pretty substantive number of militants that are pledging the oath of allegiance. They are also continue to do share battlefield updates and in this platform that I monitor very closely, Tech Haven. And one of the things that Southeast Asians should be aware of is that they are trying to appeal for Southeast Asians to rise up against their government. And this is one of the messages shared in September 2021. That's when the Taliban took over Afghanistan. And what translated this is what it says, brothers and sisters of East Asia Wilayah, this includes Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Myanmar, Philippines, and Thailand, that you have to rise up against the kafir government and citizens who are wealthy. People like me who are Chinese in ethnicity are allowed to be killed by this terrorists because we have been oppressing them. So that's the kind of message that they are sharing throughout. And this is not new. In fact, this framework of hate, it's pretty common across the terrorist landscape. Firstly, they condemn the enemy, call them kafir, takfirs. They appeal to victimhood by saying that non-Muslims are prosecuted by non-Muslims, and therefore aggression is necessary to defend ourselves. However, technological platforms are also getting more sophisticated in detecting terrorist groups. In in Telegram, they dispelled many of these terrorist group channels. In Facebook, they are doing their best, and terrorists are also learning from this experience and moving away from conventional platforms and use memes to appeal to people. So these are some of the memes that terrorists are sharing to show that they are innovating in their communications. I believe Drei, Toledo has shared that terrorists have used music videos. Here we see terrorists using memes to appeal to the audience, to simplify message. Ironically, these are Western related memes, but it's still an effective way to share messages to their constituents. And in fact, the terrorists themselves admitted that this is part of what they call mimetic warfare, where they are trying to share and spread propaganda through the use of simple to understand pictures through social media. So that's a very important development in recent years. If we assess the current and emerging platforms, we all know that terrorists have been on WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook, Instagram, what say you. But today, after the GCTF group has tried to curtail terrorism in these large platforms, terrorists has migrated to other platforms like TechHaven, Rocket Chat, TamTam, and other potential platforms include TikTok. Three of these pictures are from TikTok, Discord, and other gaming platforms. Why? That's because of the lack of regulations and also the difficulty in enforcing chat standards in gaming platforms, because once you have discussed your ideas over gaming platforms, these chats are usually deleted. So there's no way to backtrack. There's no way to figure out. So these are emerging platforms that the terrorists are using, and more enforcement means that terrorists will only move to another platform. So this is kind of like a learning competition that the governments, the authorities, and the terrorists are engaging in, and it will be forever. So that concludes the part on the learning competition between governments and terrorists in terms of sharing their ideology. But at the same time, we are also looking at the learning competition between the government and terrorists in terrorism fundraising. And this are the list of what the other speakers have shared, actually, what terrorists are trying to do to raise funds. But at the same time, the governments are getting better at cracking down on this area of fundraising. So I'd like to take some time to focus on emerging area of fundraising and funds transfer, which is cryptocurrency. Today, we don't see a lot of terrorists using cryptocurrency now. Why? Because the appeal of cryptocurrency, it's really that it is anonymous and it's very difficult to detect. But stable coins such as Bitcoin and Ethereum are getting more and more able to detect through de-anonymization technologies. As you know, you also know that the recent cryptocurrency market is pretty volatile, and the coins are unreliable in terms of storing the value. At the same time, newcomers face a lot of difficulties to enter into the cryptocurrency market, to transfer funds, to raise funds. And therefore, there are limitations to terrorists using cryptocurrency for their purposes. However, despite these limitations, we have seen some initial movement in terrorist organizations to use cryptocurrency. And I believe the authorities can do more to regulate this market to prevent money laundering and terrorism financing. A few events, in particular in Southeast Asia, that caught my attention, which is one, Bahrain 9, who advocated for the use of Bitcoin to transfer funds in 2016. Two, there's this organization called Abu Ahmad Foundation, who conducted fundraising through cryptocurrency in 2018. And I believe there's a report in the Philippines sharing that the ISIS in Philippines has first conducted its cryptocurrency transaction in 2020. So there are movements, the terrorists are looking into cryptocurrency, and the regulations on cryptocurrency to prevent terrorism financing and money laundering has to be in place in a much more rapid rate. Being from Singapore, I'd also like to touch on the Singapore context, because I guess the other speakers has touched on their respective countries, and it's only my obligation to talk about Singapore. So the Singapore context, there are three major things that we need to know about Singapore. Firstly, it is perceived as a metropolis, a global financial and transportation hub. It is also a cosmopolitan society. Our residents are mobile, fluid. We receive many travelers even during the COVID plague years. And this makes Singapore an attractive target for terrorism. In 2015, if I recall right, ISIS actually pronounced Singapore as a legitimate target, enemy of ISIS, because we participated in the anti-ISIS coalition. But at the same time, we need to recognize that even if Singapore did not participate in the anti-ISIS coalition, we will be a target anyway. So that's because we're cosmopolitan, we're secular, and we are perceived to be that metropolis. But most importantly, in the context of Singapore, we have a very high internet penetration rate. We have 148% mobile penetration rate in Singapore. That means including babies and old people, every Singaporean has at least 1.5 mobile device, including babies and old people. So that's a very high internet penetration rate that leads to a very significant trend in Singapore, where most Singaporeans who are radicalized are self-radicalized. Let me try to repeat that again. Most Singaporeans who are radicalized are self-radicalized. 80% of the detainees in Singapore, or actually more than 80% of the detainees in Singapore, are self-radicalized by various ideologies. It's not just the ISIS ideology, the Al-Qaeda ideology, but ideologies from everywhere. Let me just give you an example of this. So most Singaporeans are radicalized through online religious lectures. Lectures could and radical preachers, foreign preachers. We take a very strict approach on radical foreign preachers. As long as they preach divide and violence between race or religion, Singapore takes a very strong stance against it. So people like Zakir Naik, who is kind of like a gray area, is classified as a radical preacher in Singapore. So Singaporeans who are radicalized tend to be radicalized by radical preachers. This includes all these people, and they are from all over the globe. So let me just try to share with you some of the concrete examples of what Singaporeans do after being radicalized, and that is to fundraise for these radical preachers. So Singaporeans who are radicalized tend to donate directly to the preachers themselves. And these preachers, as I shared before, they are from all around the world. So Sheikh Abdullah Al-Faisal is from Jamaica. Singaporeans have donated to people like Akil Zainal, who was based in Syria, part of ISIS, and also Zahran Hashim, who is the mastermind of the Sri Lanka Easter attack. So in essence, there is no common ideology uniting the arrested detainees in Singapore. It's basically Singaporeans going online, getting radicalized by preachers, and then donating to these preachers. So the profile of terrorism in Singapore, it's pretty different in this sense. So how is Singapore trying to deal with the threat of radicalization and terrorism in Singapore? Locally, I think there are three approaches Singapore takes. First, tough laws. Second, partnerships with industries. And third, government and CSO partnerships. So let me just go through the government CSO partnerships first. Singapore believes that the first line of defense against terrorism is social cohesion. Therefore, we have two particular organization dealing with social cohesion in Singapore. Firstly, the Interreligious Organization, IRO, which is a voluntary organization, non-government, and also the interracial and religious confidence circles. This is a ground-up movement, but it's also directed by the government. These organizations aim to encourage social mixing between various religions and to share the different interpretation of scriptures, so that there is no hate between religious circles. The second thing Singapore does, it's preparation, emergency preparedness. So in Singapore, a lot of us are prepared in CPR, in first aid, in psychological first aid as well. So this aims to prepare us Singaporeans in the event of an attack or in the event of a crisis. How can we respond to it through helping injured people, providing first aid, and to counsel people, the affected people. So that's the preparation phase through SG Secure and the C2E initiatives. And finally, and most importantly, after terrorists are being detained, we strive very hard to reintegrate them back into society through the religious rehabilitation group and the aftercare group. Singapore takes there's three pillars to the rehabilitation program in Singapore. I will not deep dive into this, but firstly, the religious rehabilitation, second, social rehabilitation, and thirdly, vocational rehabilitation. It's very important that we focus on also the social and vocational rehabilitation aspect of the process, because research has found in desistance studies that family involvement in rehabilitation, it's crucial in desistance, in preventing recidivism. So that's why it is essential for not just terrorist rehabilitation, but rehabilitation as a whole to deal with the social and vocational aspect of it as well. Moving on, for the legislation, Singapore has multiple legislations against terrorism, but I'll focus on the fundraising aspect of it. So there's the Corruption, Drug Trafficking, and Other Serious Crimes Act in 1992. If you attempt to conceal transaction, you shall be liable to 3 years in prison or $50,000 or both. But if you're affiliated to the Terrorism Suppression of Financing Act in 2002, you'll be liable to $500,000 or prison term of not exceeding 10 years or both. So these are very tough laws against terrorism and money laundering that Singapore takes. And these laws are reviewed very regularly. In particular, the Terrorism and Suppression of Financing Act, if I recall right, there is an announcement that might be made this year to review this legislation to ensure that more aspects of this terrorism financing is being covered into this. Finally, we also work very closely with the banks. We have the ACIP partnership between the government and the bank to ensure that the banks are adequately prepared, equipped to identify, assess, and mitigate money laundering and terrorism financing risk in Singapore. So the ACIP does the workshops to train forensic officers. They also share best practices to ensure that our financial law enforcement practices stay up to date. So apart from this, there are other practices that Singapore does to ensure that terrorism financing is kept at bay. So this is an overview of what Singapore does to ensure that terrorism is kept at bay. We have a strong legal framework. We have enforcement through the various agencies. We have institutional framework, bringing the industries into play to ensure that terrorism financing is kept at bay, and also, and most importantly, the societal response, because the society and social cohesion is really our first line of defense against terrorism. With that, I will end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kenneth Yeo, our last distinctive speakers for this afternoon. And I think, because I'm very conscious of time and we only have 20 minutes left, I'm gonna go straight to the chat box where we already have several questions waiting in line. First question is from Unaisa Rahma addressed to Pak Adhe. Pak Adhe, the question is, after the arrest of Sham organizers leader in 2021, how does it affect the fundraising activity for GI? Do they survive or transform into different organizations with different names? And also, probing questions is there any difference between pro-GI and pro-ISIS charities in Indonesia? Say pro-GI charities usually are more established than the latter, perhaps? Pak Adhe, if you would kindly address this question, please.
Yes, thank you, Wulan, and also thank you for other speaker. That very wonderful, great presentation for its context, perspective. Yes, I want to answer the question from Une, my friend. Before I answer the question from Une, maybe I'll little bit make for the audience to understand about what is the why some organizer is become a Jamaah Islamiyah affiliated, because some organizer is run by or management is Jamaah Islam member. So this is interesting when Jamaah Islam member establish a charity organization and gathering money from people, not from their own members. So this is different. And then they send some money to in the name of charity expedition to like Syria, and with them some of the Jamaah Islamiyah personnel with them, not only to give the aid to the people that need, but also to make a contact with the Al-Qaeda affiliation in Syria, which is Jabal al-Nusra. And they train there how to drive a tank, how to use the big artillery. So about last 2 years, I think that after Para Wijayanto, Amir of leader of Jamaah Islamiyah, arrested by the authorities, and then the involvement of some organizer as Jamaah Islamiyah underbow reveal, and then police arrested a lot of Jamaah Islam member that also become a management in some organizer charity organization. So in this on that time, until now, I think there are no decision from the court about to freeze the some organizer as organization, and there are no evidence that the money that getting from the people is used by the Jamaah Islamiyah to for example, for their action, for buy explosive material or something. There's no, but only for supporting their activities in charity and send people to Syria. Only that for now. And then, but because of a lot of arrested, yes, right now, some organizer like freeze their activities. Like now, there are no activities. There are no. Especially in Ramadan, we always find that they're very active to fundraising from people in the name of help the Syria people. But right now there are no such activities right now, but not because of the ban by the government now, but they stopped it. And then also another underbow charity organization by Jamaah Islamiyah like Abdurrahman bin Auf organization. Yes, there are no activities, good activities right now. When you asking what is different, the pro Al Qaeda or pro GI with the pro ISIS, just like I say, when some organizer gathering money from people, from the common people, from the community, that's another difference. So Jamaah Islamiyah very open asking people to donate their money to the Jamaah. But if you're looking at the pro-ISIS, maybe it's if you're looking through a long time ago, yes, a lot of organization like Infak Dakwah Center and Azam Dakwah Center. Azam Dakwah Center right now is transferred to Anfiku Center, just like Kenneth mentioned about that. Yes, but they are more the pro-ISIS more exclusive lah. But even I mean like this, if they're getting money from people, and then they also give the money not only for their member, but also some of them is going to the public. But if you looking at some organizer, there are no help for example, the perpetrator of Jamaah Islamiyah that arrested by police family, no. So some organizer not funding or not give money to the family, to the Jamaah Islamiyah member that arrested by police. Actually, they have a part of like organization, internal part of organization, structure of organization inside Jamaah Islamiyah that have role that to support the family, not through this open organization. That's maybe the difference. So maybe, but if you're looking at the Infak Dakwah Center or Anfiku Dakwah Center, they're very directly help the pro-ISIS member or family that have need help by the groups. So also, I believe there's a question from Daryl, Mbak Wulan, about how the government not
haven't shut down the pro-ISIS charities.
Yes, actually, yes. Actually, just like I say, right now, after the government, the authority reveal about their involvement in terrorism, yes, they banned that. They arrested a lot of management, and then automatically the charity organization is still stopped. But maybe this is what I say about this, like a tip of iceberg. So maybe we still until now we don't have any proof to that other organization charity that have involvement with the terrorist group. For example, like some organization, we are very surprised that they have a link to the Jamaah Islamiyah. Maybe that's can answer the UNE question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Adhe. Moving on, I think I have two questions addressed to Dr. Ahmad El-Muhammady. Also from Daryl, the question addressed to Dr. Ahmad El-Muhammady is, what do you personally think of Taliban? Should our countries recognize it as a government despite its extremist worldview? And also from TS, who asks about, you've met and also have many conversations with jihadis, as they call themselves. Is there any conversations about what is the best way, in their opinions, to stop terrorism? Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmad El-Muhammady.
Thank you very much. When you talk about advising policymaker to recognize certain entity or certain government, I think if I am requested, let's say by the Malaysian government to give my view on this, there are two ways that I can do this. Number one is as speak as an academics, purely academic perspective on Taliban. Number two, from the perspective of a state. Some people do not make the distinction between the academic view and the view of a policymaker. But in my experience, talking to the governments, I believe that there is a lot of difference between speaking as an academic and speaking as a policymaker or speaking as the national leader. So if you ask me about Taliban, of course, there are a lot of people refuse to recognize Taliban as a government because of their extremist view, because of what they have done in the past. But I think in making decision at this point of time, I mean, of course, when we talk about Taliban, we have to be mindful about what Taliban that we are talking about now. Are we talking about Taliban that we have seen happen or emerge in the past, in the 1990s or early 2000, or what we're talking about Taliban that we have today? I think we have to make that distinction first. If we talk about Taliban in the past, which is the first version of Taliban, maybe we have hesitation to recognize them as a government because of their approach, their attitude. But we talk about Taliban that we are dealing with today. I think some countries, especially neighboring countries, including United States and some Arab countries, they, including China, they start to engage with Taliban. Well, not to say recognize, but engagement. So they adopt the policy of engagement. Why? Because they believe that Taliban is start to open up. Maybe not to change completely, but Taliban come to rationalization or come to their senses that for the past 20 years, they have learned a lot of lesson from several years of ruling Afghanistan. And after that, they lost power, and it was under the another administration for 20 years. So this 20 years time, I believe that Taliban has learned something. Maybe we can't say that they have changed completely, but there are certain things that they have changed. I mean, to be speaking, realistically speaking, from the realist point of view, let us put aside our ideological belief, our perception that we have. Let us dealing with the fact today. So there are certain things that we can see changes. For example, their willingness to engage with the world. Their willingness to engage with the world. As we compare with the previous government, they refuse to engage with the world completely. So right now they start to open up and try to talk to the other government, including. That's why I think United States, even though one single policy, foreign policy of the United States, that the United States do not negotiate with terrorist organization, and Taliban happen to be the organization that is United States is negotiating. So what is the basis for United States to negotiate with the terrorist organization such as Taliban? So definitely United States decision to engage with Taliban is not done by the ideological justification or the ideological basis. The main principle, the main principle of the state to negotiate with another state cannot be done on the basis of ideology. It is always done on the basis of national interest. National interest precede ideological consideration. So I think that's the basis for United States to negotiate with Taliban. So in the context of, let's say I want to advise Malaysian government in this regard, I would say, what is Malaysia's interest in this? What are the interests that our interests that we should protect, that we should take care of if we are to negotiate with Taliban or if we are to engage with Taliban? Are we gaining more of engaging or disengaging? Because a lot of people right now, a lot of countries disengage with Taliban. So I would say, of course, as you can see, Malaysian government, they decided to, I call this cautious optimism. Actually, if I can give you, do I have how long that I have, Wulan? Maybe 1-2 minutes, yes?
1-2 minutes, yes,
okay,
please.
Okay. It's a background. I mean, when Taliban started to emerge in Afghanistan, of course, the government asked the opinion. And I say that the best way forward would be cautious optimism, meaning that we optimistically recognize the Afghanistan right now under the rule of the Afghan people. But the thing is that we have to be very cautious because they have a bad history before. But we have to continuously engage, because if we do not engage with Taliban, the government will be sliding down into another form of government, which is totalitarian maybe, and maybe with engage with terrorism activity and so on and so forth. So we want to prevent that. However, with engagement, then I think we can give some impact. So that is the cautious optimism means. And a lot of people talk about what are the impact of Taliban towards the world, towards the Southeast Asia, for example. But we never talk about what are the impact of engagement of the Southeast Asian country or neighboring country towards Taliban. To what extent Taliban has changed, to have transformed after the engagement by the world. I think this is another research subject that we have to explore. And just now, I mean, if I can relate with radicalization, we talk about radicalization. I think radicalization in Southeast Asia remains. Even though the arrests or the activities that you can see on the surface level is not being so visible. But one thing that I observe is the transformation of radicalization from, let's say, religious radicalization, a political radicalization, to health radicalization. A lot of people adopted radical perception, radical belief, or radical perception in the health-related issues. So it's still radicalization, but in different form. I think that's all as of now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ahmad El-Muhammady. I'm really conscious about time, so I'm trying to be able to accommodate the questions, but I think it would be best to be able to give time for Q&A for each of the panelists. So I'm going to head straight to the questions for Ms. Drei Toledo from Amiravelda Priyono. As the Philippines is currently in election season, what can you expect for the new president against terrorism in this post-pandemic? Thank you. Probably short and sweet. Thank you very much. You're still muted, Ms. Toledo.
Based on the Philippines poll surveys, the most recent one, we have over 60% that support the unit team under the former Senator Bongbong Marcos and as president, and for vice president, the leading one is the daughter of the current president, Inday Sara Duterte. For the landslide win that is expected, because it's over 60% of the solid base of supporters that support this tandem for the 2022 elections, there is hope that the National Task Force to end the local communist armed conflict will be sustained, because the problems that we do have, even with regards to Daesh, with Abu Sayyaf, with the influence of the Taliban, is heavily latched onto the political infrastructure of the Communist Party of the Philippines, New People's Army, and the National Democratic Front. So we can see that in the next administration, there will be continuity under the present administration's stand and strong stance against terrorism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Toledo. I think, okay, we still have 2 minutes left, so probably going to Kenneth. Hi, Kenneth. There's one question from Jason Salim, which I think you've covered mostly about cryptocurrencies. So if you can help address the questions on your insights whether funds from overseas have started to flow back to Southeast Asia as the economy starts recovering. And yes, please go ahead, Kenneth. Short and sweet, please. Thank you.
Right. So I would say that firstly, because it's cryptocurrency, it's tough to trace and detect. Nobody would know exactly where the funds come from, but we have some guesses based on historical precedents. Nonetheless, I thought maybe I should emphasize on a few key things. One, which is the government and terrorist groups are and will be facing a learning competition where governments aim to update their laws and regulation to combat terrorism through terrorism financing laws, or also the ideological realm, and terrorist groups will try to overcome them. So terrorism is here to stay. So despite the lack of news on terrorism, I think all four presenters have shared insights on how terrorist organizations are reorganizing. And three, I think we should all not be complacent with regards to the threat of terrorism. That's with regards to the funds and stuff. I guess there's really no way for us to identify at this point in time, but there are historical precedents that we can trace back to. But history is always we should not rely on it too much, in my opinion. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Kenneth, and also thank you very much, Pak Adhe, Ms. Drei Toledo, Dr. Ahmad El-Muhammady, for your impressive and thorough presentations, and also for your engagement in answering or responding to the audience feedback. And due to the limited time that we have, unfortunately, probably there are more burning questions that we cannot accommodate or didn't have time to explore further. Would appreciate if you could directly address your questions or comments to each of the distinctive panelists, as you probably can find their contact information through the organizers. And by that, this marks the end of our 3-part webinar series. We would like to thank all our esteemed speakers for sharing their insights in our sessions, and to all our participants for spending 3 afternoons with us. We hope this webinar series have been beneficial. And before we end, this is a reminder that all of these sessions can be found on PAKAR's YouTube channel and Stratsea.com. And for those keen, Stratsea.com welcomes all to commentary submissions as well for publication. So please do not hesitate to direct your submissions for Stratsea.com. And I would like to wish everyone have a good afternoon. And for those of you who observe Ramadan, have a great iftar ahead. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wulan.
Thank you, Wulan.
Thank you,
Ken.
Dr. Ahmad. Thank you, Pak Adhe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kenneth, and thank you, Drei.
Nice
Thank
to
you
meet all
very
of you.
Yes. See you again.